Hi everyone, welcome back. The learning goal for this video is given the name of an element, you should be able to write its correct symbol. From the symbol, you should be able to write the correct name. Elements are pure substance from which all other things are built. Elements cannot be broken down into simpler substances. And if you have access to the textbook, they are listed on the inside of the front cover. For any assessment, I will provide a periodic table of elements for you, which has been designed by the American Chemical Society. And throughout this unit here, you will become very familiar with the periodic table of elements and what this all means. So I highly recommend you getting access to a printed copy. I will post this on Canvas for you to utilize during your homeworks and your assessments. So please definitely practice with this periodic table because that's what you'll be using for your assessments. Now, the names of all the elements come from planets, mythological figures, minerals, colors, geographic locations, and even famous people. As you can see here, uranium, which has the symbol U, comes from the planet Uranus. Californium, which has the chemical symbol CF, is named after California. And curium, which has a symbol CM, is named after Marie and Pierre Curie. Now, chemical symbols represent the names of the elements, and they usually consist of 1 to 2 letters and start with a capital letter. So some examples of 1-letter symbols are carbon, N for nitrogen, F for fluorine, and O for oxygen. And some examples of 2-letter symbols are CO for cobalt, Ca for calcium, Al for aluminum, and Mg for magnesium. So make sure you are careful when reading the periodic table of elements. This particular periodic table does have the name of the element under the symbol. But for example, sometimes I have students confuse manganese, which is symbol Mn, with magnesium, like I just showed you, which has the symbol Mg. So there's no need to memorize the name for the symbol, but just be careful when you're doing assessments. Don't work so fast that you might make a mistake. So a lot of times I'll have students confuse copper with CO, but copper is actually Cu. Okay, that's all here on this resource. So once again, this table shows us some names and symbols of some common elements that we're going to work with. And by the end of this unit and the future units we work together, you'll become very familiar with many of these elements. But there are some elements where the names and symbols don't necessarily match. And just some examples are for example, silver is Ag and gold is Au. So utilizing the ACS periodic table, pause this video and work on the study check, and then come back and check your answers with me. All right, let's write the correct chemical symbols for each of the following. What did you find for iodine? Okay, that is capital letter I. What about for iron? Excellent, that is Fe. So we can see here, Fe is iron, and iodine is capital letter I. What about for magnesium? Mg, good. Zinc, Zn, and then nitrogen, capital letter N. Remember, the first letter is always capitalized. All right, so You should be able to go from the name to the symbol, but you should also go from the symbol to the name. So go ahead, pause this video, utilize the ACS periodic table, and then come check your work with me when you're done. All right, what did you get for P? Good, that's phosphorus. What about AL? Good, that's aluminum. And MN, manganese, very good. What about for H? Hydrogen. What about for K? Potassium, good. That one gets a little confusing. It doesn't necessarily match with the name. So once again, when you see P versus K, make sure you double check which element it is. So for P, that is phosphorus. And then for K, that is potassium. And although you'll have the periodic table as a resource, I recommend you practice it with enough that you begin to learn some of the more common elements. For example, we'll work a lot with carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and sulfur, only because, as I've stated before, chemistry is like learning another language. And so the faster you can retrieve that knowledge, like in your brain, if you've started to memorize some of these, the faster you'll be able to work through problems and to be able to communicate chemistry. But as always, you will always have access to the periodic table to work with. Now, there's some elements and definitely compounds that are not necessarily healthy for us. One that you may be familiar with is the toxicity of mercury. Now, mercury is a metal, and it's actually the only liquid metal, and its symbol is Hg. It is silvery, it's shiny, and it's liquid at room temperature. Usually metals are solids at room temperature. Now, it can enter the body by mercury vapor inhalation, contact with the skin, or ingestion of water or food that's contaminated with mercury. Once mercury has entered the body, it destroys proteins and can disrupt cell function. And long-term exposure can damage the brain and kidneys, cause different developmental issues over time. Mercury contamination comes from industrial waste, fish and seafood, and batteries, and compact fluorescent bulbs. So if you do come across something that contains mercury, let's say you have an old mercury thermometer at work, it's important to contact someone who is in charge of waste disposal at your hospital or place of employment to dispose of that mercury thermometer properly. And for our laboratories, we've switched to only digital thermometers. But once again, there are some mercury thermometers out there that we need to be very mindful of disposing properly. Same thing, for example, with fluorescent bulbs and batteries. It's important to always dispose of your waste properly so that it doesn't go into the landfill or into our water. Thank you all for watching, and as always, email me with any questions.